They say war changes you, but nothing prepared me for what I saw when I came home. Her breathing was ragged. The room smelled faintly of medicine and dust, and the television flickered with static in the corner. My grandmother, my rock, was lying alone, eyes half open, struggling to even lift a hand. And the worst part? Her phone lay on the floor, glowing with unanswered calls she'd tried to make. Not a single one picked up. Not even from my parents. My name is Captain Meredith H. I am 35 years old, and I serve as a U.S. Army officer. I've seen men bleed out in sand. I've carried brothers through mortar fire, and I thought nothing could rattle me again. But that day, in my own hometown, the battlefield felt closer than ever. The air inside the house was stale, thick with the scent of neglect. There were unopened meal boxes on the counter, dust on the furniture, and silence pressing against my ears. I dropped my duffel bag, still covered in desert grit, and rushed to Grandma's side. Her lips trembled as she whispered my name, barely a thread of recognition left in her voice. I knelt, grabbed her hand, and felt the bones fragile beneath paper-thin skin. "It's me. I'm here," I said, forcing calm into my tone, though my chest was burning. Her eyes filled, and for a moment, I saw the strength that had raised me when my parents were too busy with their world. She had been the one who taught me to stand straight, to respect the uniform long before I ever wore it. And now, she had been left to fade alone. The betrayal hit me like incoming fire. My parents weren't gone on business, weren't tied up in some unavoidable crisis. No. When I checked the family Facebook page on Grandma's cracked laptop, there it was. Sunlit beaches, cocktails in hand, captions dripping with hashtags. Cabo life. Living it up. They abandoned her while she was dying. I felt heat crawl up my throat, the kind that doesn't come from anger alone. It came from shame. Shame that I wasn't here sooner. Shame that the woman who raised me was suffering while her own children treated themselves to paradise. A memory struck me. Years ago, high school graduation night. My father had promised to be there, but he skipped for a golf trip. Grandma had driven 3 hours, sat in the front row, clapping louder than anyone else. She always showed up. Always. And now? No one showed up for her. The tick of the old wall clock cut through the silence, each second heavier than the last. I dialed my mother, straight to voicemail. My father? Same thing. I wanted to scream, but instead I stayed beside Grandma, moistening her lips with water, whispering steady words to keep her calm. And then I noticed the corner of the room, Grandpa's old safe. I remembered his warning years ago. When the time comes, what's inside will decide who truly deserves this family's name. My pulse spiked. I didn't want to think about it. Not yet. But my eyes kept dragging back to it, as though the truth was locked inside, waiting for me. Outside, cicadas buzzed under the fading sun. Inside, my heart hammered with a different kind of war. Grandma's hand trembled in mine, and she whispered something so faint I had to lean close. Her words made me freeze. "Meredith, don't let them take everything." Her grip tightened for one last moment, and then her eyes closed. The house fell silent, and at that exact second, my phone lit up with a flood of notifications. My parents had finally noticed. 122 missed calls. I stared at the phone, jaw locked, while my eyes slid back toward Grandpa's safe. My hand was already reaching for it, because if they thought they were coming home to claim anything, they had no idea who they were dealing with. I didn't cry. Not right away. Soldiers are taught to compartmentalize, to shelf the pain until there's time to deal with it. But this wasn't a battlefield, and my training couldn't stop the ache ripping through my chest. My grandmother, the only one who had ever believed in me without condition, was gone. And the people who should have been here weren't. The house was too quiet. A television whispered static. The kitchen faucet dripped. And in the stillness, I heard my own pulse like a drum in my ears. I sat there for what felt like hours, holding her hand until it cooled in mine. When the grief started to drown me, my gaze drifted back to the safe. It sat there, unassuming, like a quiet sentinel guarding whatever truths or weapons Grandpa had left behind. My hand brushed over the cool steel, remembering when I was 16, and he showed me the dial, just once. "For emergencies," he'd said, not for curiosity. Well, if this wasn't an emergency, what was? I rose, wiping dust from my uniform trousers. My duffel sat slouched near the door, desert sand spilling from its seams. I had just come back from Iraq, yet standing in my grandmother's living room, I felt more war-ready than ever. The phone buzzed again, another wave of calls. My father's name lit up the screen. Richard H., corporate consultant, suit and tie man, addicted to the image of success. Always gone, always loud at dinner about how real warriors fought in boardrooms. Then my mother, Colleen, former beauty queen, still living like every mirror loved her. She married my father because of his money and never looked back. And now? There they were, clinking glasses by the pool in Cabo, broadcasting their happiness while Grandma gasped for breath alone. I slammed the phone down on the counter so hard it rattled. My hands itched to answer, to unleash the fury boiling inside me. But no, I wasn't giving them the satisfaction. Not yet. I crouched by the safe, the numbers replaying in my head. Grandpa had made it simple, so I'd never forget. 1945, the year he shipped off to war. Then 1972, the year he married Grandma. The dial clicked under my fingers, each turn loud in the silence. My heart pounded. What was inside? Legal papers? Money? Weapons? Grandpa had been a decorated Marine, stern but cunning. He believed in protecting the family's future, not handing it away to leeches. The lock gave with a sharp metallic snap. Inside were envelopes stacked neatly, a small revolver wrapped in cloth, and one thick binder with my name written across it in his handwriting. I froze. The binder was heavy, full of documents, old letters, property deeds, a copy of the will. And in the will, plain as day, was the line I knew would burn my parents alive. In the event of my wife's passing, all primary estate and assets shall pass directly to my granddaughter, Captain Meredith H., for her loyalty and sacrifice. I couldn't breathe for a moment. The room spun, and all I heard was the thunder of my pulse. Grandpa had chosen me. He had known, long before this day, who would show up when it mattered. My phone buzzed again. This time, a voicemail notification. Against my better judgment, I pressed play. My mother's voice screeched through the speaker. "Meredith, what the hell are you doing there? We heard she's bad, but we'll be back next week. Don't touch anything. You hear me? Nothing in that house belongs to you. Nothing." The hypocrisy nearly broke me in two. They hadn't even rushed home. They were still in Cabo, worried about possessions, not about the woman who raised them. The rage sharpened into something else, cold, deliberate, surgical. I closed the binder, slid it under my arm, and whispered to the silence, "They have no idea what's coming." The air outside shifted as the sun disappeared behind the trees. A storm was building, the wind pressing against the shutters. I stood at the doorway, staring at Grandma's rocking chair still swaying slightly, as if she'd just risen from it. Behind me, the safe stood open. In front of me, my parents' names still blinked across the phone screen. I took one step forward, then another. Because I wasn't just going to defend what was mine, I was going to make them feel what she felt. The storm rolled in like artillery fire. Thunder cracked low across the horizon, and the first drops spattered against the windows as I stood in that empty house, the binder heavy in my hands. My parents thought they could call the shots from 1,000 miles away, but the will said otherwise. Grandpa's words were final, his trust unshakable, and I swore then I would honor it. I set the binder on the table and paced. My boots echoed against the hardwood floor, scuffed from decades of family gatherings. Memories floated up unbidden. Thanksgiving dinners where my father mocked my decision to enlist. "You're wasting your brains?" he'd say, glass of scotch in hand. My mother would smile faintly, never defending me, just twirling her hair like his words were law. But Grandma? She was the one who sent letters to Iraq every month. She was the one who stitched a cross into the lining of my uniform before deployment. She was the one who prayed for me when no one else bothered. Now her body lay in the next room, and my parents' voices buzzed through voicemails about possessions. I slammed my fist against the counter. The storm outside roared back at me, lightning flashing through the curtains. I needed to act. The military taught me, hesitation kills. So I dialed a number I hadn't used in years, Uncle Dean. Dean was my father's younger brother, the black sheep of the family. A mechanic by trade, grease always under his nails, heart bigger than his wallet. He had been cut out of family holidays years ago after refusing to measure up to Richard S. corporate standards. But I remembered the way he used to sneak me candy when my parents weren't looking, the way he laughed with Grandma at jokes no one else understood. The line clicked. His voice was gruff, wary. "Hello? Uncle Dean. It's Meredith." There was a pause, then a low exhale. "Kiddo? Damn. Been years. You back stateside?" "I'm at Grandma's." My voice cracked. "She's gone." Silence. Then the sound of a chair scraping back. "Tell me you're not alone." "I am. Not for long." And just like that, he hung up. I closed my eyes, feeling some of the weight lift. At least I wouldn't have to fight this battle alone. The safe still stood open, the revolver gleaming under a stray lightning flash. I didn't want to touch it, not yet. But knowing it was there gave me a cold reassurance. My training taught me how to handle weapons, but this wasn't Fallujah. This was home turf. And on this battlefield, words would be sharper than bullets. I poured myself water, the glass trembling in my hand. My phone buzzed again. Another voicemail, this time my father's voice. "Meredith, we saw you went to the house. Don't do anything stupid. We'll deal with this when we're back. You've been gone too long to understand how things work now." I laughed, an ugly, bitter sound that surprised even me. Too long to understand? I understood better than any of them. Loyalty wasn't measured in vacation photos or business deals. It was measured in who stood by you at your weakest. An hour later, headlights cut through the storm outside. Tires crunched gravel. I peeked through the blinds. Uncle Dean's pickup, rusty and reliable as always, rolled up the drive. He came inside without knocking, soaked from the rain, his arms open wide. "Come here, soldier." I broke then, just for a moment. I buried my face in his jacket, smelling the oil and tobacco, and let the tears fall. He patted my back awkwardly, grumbling, "Damn it, Meredith. She deserved better." We sat at the table. I slid the binder toward him. He flipped through the papers, whistled low. "Well, hell. Richard and Colleen ain't gonna like this one bit." "That's the point," I said flatly. Dean looked at me with something like pride. "So, what's the plan?" Lightning split the sky again, throwing the whole room in stark white. My fingers drummed against the binder. "The plan," I whispered, "is to make them come home. And when they walk through that door, they'll realize Cabo was the biggest mistake of their lives." The storm outside hadn't let up. Rain hammered against the roof like boots marching in formation, steady and merciless. Uncle Dean leaned back in Grandma's old kitchen chair, the binder spread open between us. His face was weathered, eyes narrowing as he read Grandpa's words over and over. "They left her to die alone," I said, my voice low but sharp. "And now they want to come back here and pretend they cared? Not happening." Dean rubbed his jaw, grease still under his nails. "You know your dad. He'll fight this. He'll drag it to court if he has to." "Then let him," I snapped. "I'll fight harder." The army taught me discipline, but right then, rage was my commander. Every voicemail, every photo of their Cabo drinks burned in my chest. Grandma had begged me not to let them take everything. Those words weren't just about money, they were about her legacy. I remembered being 10 years old, helping Grandma hang laundry in the backyard. She had leaned close, whispering, "Meredith, you'll be stronger than both your parents someday. Don't let their greed swallow you whole." At the time, I thought she was just being dramatic. But now? Those words rang like prophecy. The storm groaned outside. Dean closed the binder and met my eyes. "So, what's the move?" I inhaled, steadying myself. "We hold the ground until they show up. They're not walking into a warm welcome. They're walking into consequences." Dean chuckled, shaking his head. "You always were Grandpa's soldier." Hours bled by. We cleaned up the kitchen, brewed black coffee strong enough to keep us wired, and waited. I dressed Grandma's body with care, covering her with her favorite quilt. The one she crocheted during the winter my father skipped Christmas for a ski trip. Every stitch felt like a goodbye. By dawn, the storm eased. Sunlight broke through clouds, painting the wet street in gold. And right on cue, the sound of tires announced their arrival. A sleek black SUV rolled up the drive. My father stepped out first, sunglasses on though the sky was still heavy with rain. My mother followed, draped in silk like she had just walked off a runway, even in her grief costume. Their smiles from Cabo were gone, replaced with stiff faces that reeked of calculation. Dean muttered, "Showtime." I opened the door before they could knock. My uniform still clung to me, boots planted, binder tucked under my arm. "Meredith," my mother said, voice sharp as glass. "Where is she?" I let them inside. My father glanced around, his eyes darting to the safe left cracked open. He stiffened but said nothing. We stood in the living room, the air heavy with silence. Grandma's body lay in the back room, covered gently. "She's gone," I said simply. My mother gasped, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief she'd pulled from nowhere. My father only sighed, shaking his head like it was a burden. Damn shame. She should have had someone here. The words snapped something in me. She did have someone here. Me. His jaw tightened. "You weren't here soon enough, were you?" Dean slammed a fist on the counter. "You two were sipping margaritas while she begged for breath." My mother flinched, but my father held his ground. "We deserve respect, Meredith. And don't think for a second that safe gives you power. Whatever's in there belongs to the family." I stepped forward, binder in hand. "Correction, it belongs to me." My father's eyes narrowed. My mother's painted lips parted. The room felt like a battlefield, lines drawn, silence thick. I opened the binder to the will, laid it flat on the table, and slid it toward them. "Read it." Their eyes scanned the page. My mother's face paled. My father's jaw twitched. This is ridiculous," he said, voice low. "We'll contest it. We'll bury this in paperwork." I leaned closer, voice steady as steel. "Then you'll bury yourselves right next to it." The air cracked between us, more dangerous than any firefight I'd ever stood in. And then my father smirked, the kind of smirk that meant he wasn't backing down. That smirk. I'd seen it 1,000 times before, at dinner tables, during arguments, in the shadows of every failure he twisted back onto me. My father thrived on control. But this time it wasn't his boardroom. It was Grandma's house. And the will was the weapon he couldn't spin away. Dean shifted in his chair, his fists clenched. "Rich, for once in your life, admit you screwed up." My father's gaze flicked to him, cold and dismissive. "You're still here? You were cut out of this family a long time ago." Dean leaned forward, his voice a growl. "I cut myself out because I couldn't stand the way you treated her, treated everyone." My mother interjected, her voice dripping with false calm. "Enough. This isn't about ancient grudges. It's about what's fair. Meredith, darling, you've been gone for years. You don't understand how hard we've worked to keep this family afloat." I laughed, short, sharp, bitter. "Worked? You call cocktails in Cabo work?" Her face twisted, the mask cracking. "You don't get it. We've sacrificed everything for this family." "No," I said, standing tall, the weight of my uniform grounding me. "Grandma sacrificed, Grandpa sacrificed, Dean sacrificed. You two, you took. And now, you're still trying to take." The air was tense, the storm outside replaced by a heavy silence inside. My father finally snapped the will shut and shoved it back across the table. "This isn't over," he said. "We'll fight it." I leaned across the table until our faces were inches apart. My voice was calm, but every word cut like glass. "Then fight me. Because I won't back down. Not now. Not ever." For the first time in my life, he didn't have a quick retort. His smirk faltered, and behind it, I saw something new. Doubt. Dean clapped his hands once, breaking the silence. "Well, guess that settles it. You two better start packing because this house isn't yours anymore." My mother turned, her voice shrill. "You can't do this. You'll regret it, Meredith. You don't know what it means to go up against us." I stepped forward, binder pressed tight against my chest. "You're right. I don't know what it means to go up against you, because I've already beaten worse than you'll ever be. I've survived mortars, snipers, and nights where death was inches from my face. Do you think a couple of selfish parents scare me?" Her lips trembled. My father's fists clenched at his sides. The facade of power was slipping. A memory surged. Standing in the barracks overseas, letters from Grandma spread across my bunk. She had written, "Meredith, when you feel surrounded, remember you're never truly alone. Someone always has your back." Dean glanced at me now, and I realized what she meant. I wasn't fighting this war alone. The tension finally broke when my father grabbed his keys. "Fine, enjoy this little victory, but don't get comfortable. When we're back, lawyers will be too." They stormed toward the door. My mother muttered curses under her breath, her heels clicking like gunfire against the hardwood. I didn't move. I stood there, breathing steady, watching them leave like enemies retreating from a lost battle. The SUV roared to life outside, taillights glowing red as it disappeared down the wet street. Dean whistled low. "Well, soldier, that was something." I sank into Grandma's chair, exhaustion finally pressing down on me. The binder lay heavy on my lap, the weight of both love and war. But this wasn't over. They'd be back, with lawyers and schemes. And I would be ready. Because they underestimated me one last time. My phone buzzed again. This time, not a call, but a message. A screenshot from Facebook. My parents had posted a picture from the airport, captioned, "Headed home to deal with a greedy daughter." My fists tightened. They were already spinning the story, painting me as the villain. Dean looked over my shoulder and spat. Unbelievable. I stood, gripping the binder. My voice was steady, ice running through every syllable. They want a war? Then a war is exactly what they'll get. The next 3 days felt like a siege. Every hour, another call, another message, another public jab at me through Facebook posts my parents crafted to make themselves look like martyrs. Abandoned by our daughter. Stolen from by blood. They knew exactly what they were doing, manipulating the image, the way they always had. But I'd fought wars overseas. I knew how to fight one at home. Dean stayed by my side. We buried Grandma quietly, just the two of us. No priests, no flowers from my parents, no staged photos. Just rain tapping on the umbrella as we lowered her into the ground. I saluted her, hand steady despite the tears blurring my vision. She had been my true north, and now it was up to me to defend her legacy. After the funeral, I began my campaign. First, I took the will straight to the lawyer Grandpa had used. A tough, wiry woman named Ms. Whitaker, who didn't blink when I handed her the binder. She read it, nodded, and said one line that made me breathe easier. They don't have a case. Your grandfather wrote this ironclad. Second, I went through every letter Grandma had saved for me. They weren't just words of love. They were evidence of who had truly been there for her. Photos of me in uniform on her fridge, notes she'd kept about phone calls, even a calendar she'd scribbled on. Meredith called, Meredith visited, page after page of proof. And third, I prepared the house. Grandpa's revolver stayed hidden, but the presence of the safe, the documents, the truth, it was all ammo. My parents would come back here, certain they could strong-arm me into surrender. They didn't understand yet. I wasn't the girl who left years ago. I was the woman who came back a soldier. On the fourth day, the SUV returned. Dean and I waited in the living room, coffee steaming, binder open on the table like bait. They came in loud, my father with his fake authority, my mother with crocodile tears. "You can't keep us out of our own house," my father barked. "It's not your house," I replied calmly. "And the court will confirm it." They tried every tactic, pleading, threatening, even guilt-tripping. My mother grabbed at my arm, hissing, "We gave you life." I looked her dead in the eye. "And Grandma gave me love. Guess which one counts more?" Dean chuckled from the corner, arms crossed. Finally, my father snapped. He slammed a fist on the table, leaning over me like he could intimidate me back into silence. "You'll regret this, Meredith. You think you're strong because you wear a uniform, but family breaks you in ways no war can." For a moment, the words stung. But then I remembered every letter Grandma wrote, every lonely night overseas when her prayers were the only thing I had. My spine straightened. "You're wrong," I said, voice steady as steel. "War made me strong enough to finally stop you." I shoved the binder toward him, the page open to Grandpa's final words. "For her loyalty and sacrifice." My father's face went white. My mother gasped, hand over her mouth. "And Dean?" He grinned like justice itself had walked into the room. They left without another word. This time, no threats, no smirks, just silence. The SUV rolled down the street, shrinking into nothing. I sank into Grandma's chair, exhaling for the first time in days. The storm had passed. The battlefield was quiet. Dean patted my shoulder. "You did it, kiddo. You honored her." I stared at the quilt draped across my lap, the stitches she'd made by hand. My chest tightened with grief, but beneath it, there was peace. Because this war wasn't about money or wills or houses. It was about loyalty, about showing up when it mattered most. And I had. I whispered into the stillness, my voice breaking but sure. "I kept my promise, Grandma." And in that moment, I realized the truth that would carry me long after the uniforms and the wars and the battles at home were done. Loyalty outlives greed, always.